Welcome back to Real Crime Stories, the podcast where we bring you crime stories from around the world. Just before sunrise on a quiet Thursday morning in Guthrie, Oklahoma, the day was unfolding like any other. Families were waking up, children getting ready for school, parents sipping coffee in still kitchens. Nothing about the calm suggested that inside a modest home on West Orbit Drive, something had gone terribly wrong. By 7:52 a.m., that calm was shattered by a frantic 911 call. On the line was 15-year-old Callie Friar. Her voice trembled as she struggled to explain what she had just discovered. Police rushed to the scene, and what they found inside the bedroom stunned even the most experienced officers. Callie's father, 50-year-old Louis Friar, was dead. The house showed signs of chaos, furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, and Louis's car was missing from the driveway. Inside the bedroom, the scene was horrific. Blood covered the bed, walls, floor, and door. Louis had suffered multiple stab wounds to the neck and back, and deep defensive cuts on his arms and hands showed he had fought desperately for his life. The attack was brutal and personal. The weapon was a kitchen knife from Louis's own home, now missing from the knife rack. Investigators believed he had been asleep when the assault began. The blankets were still tangled around his legs, and blood pooled into the mattress, suggesting the violence started while he was lying down, defenseless. By the time he could react, the fight for survival was already underway. Louis Friar was known as a devoted father and a genuinely kind man. He worked as a designer at a picture-framing company and had raised his two children, Callie and her older brother, 18-year-old Keith, largely on his own. 13 years earlier, he had been granted full custody after separating from his wife, Tricia, who struggled with drug addiction and spent time in and out of prison. Despite everything, Louis never spoke ill of her and encouraged his children to maintain a relationship with their mother. Friends described Louis as laid back, loyal, and quick to make others laugh. He loved fishing, sports, and above all, his kids. As detectives processed the scene, Callie sat shaken in the back of a patrol car, answering every question. She couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt her father. The night before had been normal: dinner, a movie, then bed around 10:30 p.m. She hadn't heard a thing during the night. That morning, when her father didn't wake her for school, the silence felt wrong. When she opened his bedroom door, she found the unthinkable. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no shattered glass. Investigators quickly ruled out a random break-in. A small smear of blood on the back door suggested the killer had escaped that way. Whoever did this appeared to know the house and possibly knew exactly when everyone would be asleep. As with all homicide investigations, detectives first turned their attention to those closest to the victim. That led them to Louis's ex-wife, Tricia. Was there a dispute? Had something changed? Initially difficult to reach, she eventually came in willingly to speak with police, setting the stage for the next phase of a deeply unsettling investigation. Tricia was cooperative, calm, and openly emotional, but not evasive. It didn't take long for investigators to rule her out. She admitted that at that point in her life, Louis had been the better parent for the children, and said she was grateful for the stability he had provided. There was no bitterness, no resentment, and no motive. Detectives were forced to look elsewhere. As the investigation continued, a new detail emerged, one that shifted the focus of the case. Callie told detectives that just days before the murder, her older brother Keith, 18, had moved out of the house. The decision followed a heated argument that began at school and carried over at home. Keith had been involved in a physical fight with another student, and when Louis learned about it, he was deeply disappointed. Louis had always been clear about one thing: once his children turned 18, They were adults, and adults were expected to take responsibility for their actions. Getting into fights was not something he was willing to tolerate. He told Keith it was time to leave. Keith went to stay with a friend, but everyone close to the family knew the separation wasn't meant to be permanent. Louis made it clear he still loved his son. If Keith owned up to what he'd done and stayed out of trouble, he would be welcomed home without hesitation. Still, detectives had to consider the possibility. Could that tension have led to something darker? Police went to Keith's school and quietly pulled him out of class. Inside the principal's office, they delivered the devastating news. His father was dead. Keith's reaction was immediate and explosive. He refused to believe it, shouting that it wasn't true. Moments later, his disbelief turned into rage. He hurled a chair against the wall before collapsing into tears. His grief was raw and overwhelming, made worse by the fact that their last conversation had ended on bad terms. Despite the emotional scene, investigators quickly ruled Keith out. Multiple friends confirmed he had been with them all night. He hadn't been anywhere near the house in days. Attention then shifted to Louis's missing car. A BLO was issued, but time was already working against investigators. 8 hours had passed since it disappeared, and the trail was growing cold. Police canvassed nearby neighborhoods, speaking to neighbors, co-workers, and anyone who knew the Friar family. Again and again, they heard the same thing. Louis didn't have enemies. He didn't argue with people. He was well liked at work and in the community. No grudges, no warning signs. The crime scene itself didn't suggest a robbery. Nothing of value had been taken. No electronics, no cash, no personal items. The only thing missing was the car, and detectives believed it was taken simply to escape, not as the motive for murder. Then 2 of Callie's friends came forward, and what they told police changed everything. They said Callie wasn't the quiet, polite girl most people believed her to be. In recent years, she had been spiraling, drinking heavily, experimenting with drugs, and hosting wild parties at the house whenever her father wasn't home. She was constantly in trouble, had been expelled more than once, and hadn't attended school for months. Louis had tried to rein her in. He tightened curfews, enforced rules, and attempted to regain control. But Callie resisted at every turn. Their relationship had deteriorated into something toxic. When police searched her bedroom, they found her diary. What they read sent a chill through them. Page after page revealed deep anger toward her father, resentment that had hardened into hatred. One line stood out above all others. "You're dead to me." Callie believed living with her mother meant freedom, no rules, no discipline, no consequences. But her father refused to allow it. And yet, despite all the tension between them, one question continued to haunt investigators. How had Callie slept through the murder? The attack had been violent. There had been a struggle, furniture overturned, blood everywhere. Louis likely shouted in pain. Then someone stole the car and drove away, and still, Callie claimed she heard nothing. It didn't make sense. Keith couldn't shake the feeling either. When he saw Callie again, when she and her mother picked him up from school after her father's death, he looked at his sister's face and knew instinctively that something wasn't right. She was lying.
Growing up, Keith and Callie had been inseparable. Partners in crime, sneaking out together, sharing secrets. But as they got older, something changed. Callie began spiraling down a darker path. Drugs, alcohol, and open defiance. Keith told police he tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen. She had always struggled with her mental health, he said, hated being told what to do, and carried a mean streak. When she was angry, she could flip in an instant. The tension between father and daughter had been building for some time, and while detectives weren't yet convinced Callie had physically committed the murder herself, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. She likely knew who did. Then investigators uncovered another crucial detail. Callie had been secretly dating a 21-year-old man named Jerome Charles Jr., known as Jay. This wasn't a harmless teenage romance. Jay was a grown man with no stable address, no steady job, and no reliable income. Yet he had become a constant presence in Callie's life. Because Jay had nowhere to stay, Callie began sneaking him into the house late at night while Louis slept just a few rooms away. Some sources even suggested Jay may have been married at the time, though that detail was never fully confirmed. But eventually, the secret came out. When Louis found out, he confronted Callie immediately. His message was clear and firm. The relationship was over. Jay was never to set foot in his home again. The age gap alone made the situation not just inappropriate, but illegal under Oklahoma law. Louis didn't stop there. The very next day, he spotted Jay wandering the neighborhood and confronted him face to face. There was no misunderstanding. Jay was not welcome, and the relationship had to end, period. For investigators, that confrontation raised a chilling possibility. With legal consequences looming and Louis standing squarely in the way of their relationship, a powerful motive had emerged. Finding Jay, however, proved difficult. Then police caught a break. Louis's missing car was located abandoned in Oklahoma City. It showed visible damage. The keys were still inside, but there was no murder weapon, no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing tying anyone directly to the killing. Still, it was the first solid lead they'd had in hours. Not long after, Jay himself was located, also in Oklahoma City. He had called a friend asking for a ride, claiming he was stranded and didn't know how to get home. The friend convinced him to stay where he was and wait for the police. Jay agreed. He didn't resist arrest. In fact, he volunteered to talk. At first, Jay denied everything. He claimed he didn't know what had happened and insisted he hadn't been there. But his story quickly unraveled. Eventually, he admitted he had been inside the Friars' home that night. Callie, he said, had let him in after everyone had gone to bed. What he told detectives next immediately raised red flags. Jay claimed Louis woke up and caught them together, then flew into a rage and tried to attack him with a golf club. Fearing for his life, Jay said he ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and acted in self-defense. But the evidence told a very different story. Louis had been attacked in his bed, not in the hallway. His feet were found near the closet where his golf clubs were stored, and none of them had been moved. They were dusty, untouched. There was no blood trail through the house. Every drop of blood was confined to the bedroom. Jay's story didn't hold up. When pressed again, he changed it. This time, Jay claimed he had broken into the house to rob Louis, but panicked when Louis woke up and stabbed him. That explanation collapsed just as quickly. Nothing had been stolen. No wallet, no electronics, no valuables. The only thing taken was the car, and even that had been abandoned without any attempt to sell or hide it. Detectives pushed harder, and finally, Jay broke. He admitted what he said was the truth, or at least his version of it. Jay claimed that Callie had been asking him to kill her father for some time. She begged him, she pleaded, she wanted Louis gone. According to Jay, that night wasn't spontaneous at all. It was planned. Callie, he said, told him exactly when to come, which door would be unlocked, where to find the knife, and when to strike. Callie promised Jay that once her father was out of the way, they would finally be free to start a new life together. But then came the detail that twisted the motive even further. Callie told Jay she was pregnant. That claim pushed him past the point of no return. That night, after Callie and her father went to bed, she quietly slipped out of her room and unlocked the back door. The rest unfolded exactly as planned. Jay entered the house silently. The knife was waiting where Callie said it would be, in the kitchen. He crept down the hallway and into the bedroom where Louis Friar slept. Jay later said he hesitated for a moment, but when Louis began to stir, that hesitation vanished. Jay lunged forward and began stabbing. The attack was frenzied and brutal. When it was over, Louis was dead. Jay grabbed the car keys, fled the house, and drove toward Oklahoma City. Somewhere along the way, he threw the murder weapon out the window. Jay claimed Callie had promised him to meet him once he arrived, but she never did. Instead, he wandered Oklahoma City alone, eventually calling Callie just before 7 a.m. to tell her where he was. Moments later, Callie dialed 911, launching what she believed was the perfect cover, a staged discovery, a panicked daughter, a flawless alibi. It unraveled in less than 24 hours. Jay was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Soon after, detectives went to Trisha's home where Callie had been staying. She was taken into custody and charged with the same crime. As detectives reviewed phone records, a clear timeline emerged. Callie had called Jay just minutes before her 911 call. Her phone also showed online activity around 3 a.m., the same time Jay said the murder occurred. She insisted she was asleep all night. The digital evidence told a different story. Call logs and messages between Callie and Jay matched his account with chilling precision. Still, Callie denied everything. She asked for a lawyer and entered a plea of not guilty. The case shocked the nation. The image of a 15-year-old girl accused of orchestrating her own father's murder dominated headlines. While in custody, Callie's phone calls were monitored. During one of them, a disturbing truth came out. Callie had never been pregnant. The pregnancy had been a lie, used to manipulate Jay, to bind him to the plan, to convince him they had a future worth killing for. When detectives told Jay the pregnancy was fabricated, he appeared genuinely shaken. It was his breaking point. Jay agreed to testify against Callie in exchange for a plea deal. Prosecutors now had their narrative, a manipulative teenager who carefully engineered her father's murder and used her older boyfriend to carry it out. Callie's mother, Trisha, stood firmly by her daughter. She told reporters she knew when Callie was lying, and this wasn't it. She believed Jay was solely responsible. But in court, Jay testified that Callie unlocked the door, told him where to find the knife, and planned every step in advance. The defense argued there was no forensic evidence tying Callie directly to the murder. No blood, no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing tying anyone directly to the killing. Still, it was the first solid lead they had in hours. For the judge, it was enough. Callie would be tried as an adult. Jay pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in July 2010 and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. In May 2011, Louis Friar, now 16, stood trial. She maintained her innocence, but the jury didn't believe her. She was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. In Oklahoma, a life sentence with parole means 45 years. Callie won't be eligible until she's 61. Jay won't see a parole board until 2077, when he'll be nearly 90. As her sentence was read, Callie didn't look toward her family. Once a blonde teenager, her appearance had changed. She showed little emotion until the very end, when a few quiet tears fell. Her attorney warned of the consequences of placing a 15-year-old girl in adult prison for decades. Callie's family declined to speak publicly, saying only that, for the first time since Louis Friar's murder, they finally felt safe. Some felt relief. They believed Callie had a dark side and that she could no longer hurt anyone else. Others felt the sentence went too far. They believed Jay, the adult, deserved more blame. Trisha continued to insist her daughter was wrongly convicted. Keith, Callie's older brother, was left to carry the weight of it all. He went to therapy, he drank, he questioned everything. She was only 15. Did she understand what she'd done? Did she ever believe it would really happen? What haunted him most wasn't just the murder, it was that she hadn't stopped it, that she lay awake in that house knowing what was coming and let it happen anyway. That kind of coldness, he said, was hard to understand. And yet, he still answered her calls. He never visited, but when the phone rang from prison, he picked up, because their father would have wanted. Thank you for listening to Real Crime Stories. Share your thoughts on the story, like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next episode, when we bring you more stories, stay vigilant.